And if it goes on and on and on, and you're not actually moving forward and doing the things that you want to be doing, now that cautiousness is turning into self-doubt. Hi there, and welcome back to Ask Dr. Syra, the show where I answer your questions about personal growth, mental health, and relationships. So today's question comes from Elise. Elise says, what's the difference between self-doubt and being cautious? What's the difference between self-doubt and being cautious? That's a really, really interesting question. It's not a question I would have thought about. But when I think to people in my life who I know who are cautious, I could understand why it could feel similar, right? And not really, you might not really be sure which one it is. So I looked into this a little bit, and what I found was 3 things that I want to share with you. So the first is about the purpose of fear. The second is about the volume of fear. And finally, the difference between cautiousness and self-doubt. So the purpose of fear, the value of fear, or the intensity of fear, volume of fear, and the difference. Okay. I could probably just answer with the third one, but I think I wanted to give you a little bit of context. So the first one is, why do we have fear, right? If you think about our very, very, very far ancestors of the past, those ancestors that had that listened to their fears and acted on their fears stayed alive. They're the people who didn't fall off cliffs before they were old enough to have, to spread their DNA forward. They didn't get eaten by tigers. They didn't fall into quicksand and die. Like, they were cautious, right? So the fear is actually adaptive for us. We do, in order to survive, we need some level of fear. Like, if you think about, and we learn that, it's a socially learned skill. Skill, I don't know if fear is a skill, but it's socially learned. And it's not as innate as we thought. So there was these experiments that they did with babies, where they had babies who were crawling. And so mom or dad or parent was standing on one side and the baby's kind of at another side, and they're crawling across like a floor. And sometimes they would substitute the spot and the baby would be crawling across a floor of clear glass. And so it's like you can actually see down. So it looks like a drop. And what they found was, when the mothers specifically, they replicated it with fathers after, but the original experiments with the mothers, if the mothers had a warm, welcoming, happy face as the babies were crawling across that glass, the babies would just crawl across the glass. They would kind of look at their mom, and then the mom would have a face, and then they'd come forward. They did that on all surfaces, but with the glass, they did that. On the glass, if the mom's face, so baby crawls across the glass because mom's like, yeah, do it. If the baby looks up at mom and mom looks scared or worried, just face, not even words, but just her body language, her facial expressions look worried and scared, the baby will actually hesitate and kind of look down and be like, and then look at the mom and then look down. Right? And if the parent is not encouraging the baby to come, the baby will learn that this is unsafe. So we're watching as we're little, what is safe and what is not safe. And some families, a lot of things feel unsafe in some families, right? There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of nervousness, you can't get dirty and you can't do this, and everything's, bugs are going to get in the house. There's a lot of that happening. And so those children grow up with a lot of that nervous energy, and that heightened level of cautiousness to sometimes to their detriment, right? So, but fear is adaptive. If we didn't have it, we wouldn't be able to stop ourselves when things were dangerous, right? There wouldn't be any mechanism inside of us to say, whoa, this could actually risk your life, so don't do it. So if you think of cautiousness as kind of a dialed down version of fear, a very mild version of fear, it's just a consideration. I'm looking to see if it's safe, like that baby does, right? Being cautious. Then we move to the second part, which is the volume and the intensity, right? So if it feels like cautiousness, if it feels like that baby kind of looking and checking, for cues and then continuing, that's different than the baby looking, checking for cues, and all is well. The environment, the mother says, come on over, and the baby still doesn't come. Now that's something different, right? Now one of two things is happening. Either the baby doesn't trust the mom, or the baby doesn't trust themselves with their crawling yet. Okay, so we can see it. We can see it in really, really young children, and it doesn't change much unless people like go to therapy and kind of work it through. The way that we are when we're really, really little tends to translate as we grow. So what's the intensity? If the cautiousness feels like that checking, like I'm going to check, make sure it's safe, and then I'm going to go ahead, that's great. That's adaptive. That's healthy. If the checking feels like I'm going to check, I'm going to look around, still don't feel comfortable going ahead, I'm going to keep checking, I'm gonna maybe watch other people, right? And see if they can do it. Okay, but I'm still not ready to go ahead. And if it goes on and on and on, and you're not actually moving forward and doing the things that you want to be doing, now that cautiousness is turning into self-doubt, right? It's no longer cautiousness. The volume is too high on that cautiousness now, and it's preventing you from actually living the life that you want to live, getting across that glass, right? Even though it feels a little bit risky. So that's the second one, which is, what's the volume? And is the volume of your cautiousness stopping you, right? So where does fear come from? Cautiousness is a quieter version of fear. And if your volume is too high on cautiousness, turning it into fear, now it's inhibiting you from living the life that you want. And it might be just in one area, right? It might be that you're totally comfortable and you're cautious, like healthily cautious in most areas, and then there's one area where you just dive in, and then there's another area you're a little like, right? An example would be cross-country skiing. So I had never been cross-country skiing. And so the first time I went, I was pretty cautious. I was pretty careful and like trying to place my feet in a certain way. And as the day went on, I got more and more comfortable and took a little bit more of a risk, right, with skiing. Now, at the end of that trip, I totally... I had a really bad fall, but that's not part of this story. But that cautiousness is important at the beginning when you're trying something new. But it shouldn't be stopping you from doing that thing in the first place. Okay? The final question was, okay, what's the difference between cautiousness and self-doubt? So this is really, really important, I think. And I kind of wish like we could teach children this at a very young age so they can just grow up knowing it. So cautiousness is about your environment, right? Is it safe for me to do this? I'm looking around at the cues. I'm looking around at the people involved. I'm looking around at the risks that are involved. And is it safe for me to do this? Okay. Self-doubt is an internal thing. Self-doubt is, can I do this? Do I have what it takes to do this? That's very different. Very different. Because I can look around and say, yeah, I don't want to do this. I have what it takes, but I'm choosing not to. That's cautiousness, right? Self-doubt is, I don't think I have it in me. I don't think it's possible for me to learn this, right? Because of course, when you're starting a new thing, you're going to not know how to do it, right? You start knitting, you don't know how to do that, but you learn. And the self-doubt is, I don't even have the bandwidth or the capacity to learn something in this area. I just can't do it. That's self-doubt. And that over time can become really, really restrictive for people because it tends to start bleeding into lots of different areas. Cautiousness can be kind of put to one particular area. Like maybe cautiousness for me is about like sports. Like I'm cautious because I'm like, I don't know how to do these things and I'm learning. The cautiousness isn't there so much in like my interpersonal relationships. I'm comfortable. I don't feel like I have to, evaluate and navigate at this point in my life. But if I had self-doubt, it would be in many areas, right? So I'm not quite sure about being a good friend. I'm not quite sure about these sports. I'm not quite sure I'm doing well at my job. So it's in many, many areas. So that's another difference that you can look out for to see, is this self-doubt or is this simply cautiousness? There's so much more to say about this, but I know that we're talking about self-doubt for a few videos. So keep watching, keep asking. Thank you. And hopefully that was helpful. So just to summarize again, what's the difference between self-doubt and being cautious? So we talked about why do we have fear, right? And understanding that cautiousness is a toned down version of fear. What's the volume on the cautiousness? And then finally, what's actually the difference between self-doubt in cautiousness. And so from the way I explained it, you might understand that, okay, so cautiousness is not a bad thing, but if it's starting to turn into self-doubt, then that's something to worry about and maybe seek some help around. So those are my thoughts for today. Hopefully that was helpful. Feel free to like and subscribe and press the notification bell so that when I make videos, you know about it. And I will see you next time. Bye.